Do you see from this historical position and your present situation, any particular direction in which future solid state might be going that interests you and concerns you at all?
Interestingly enough, back in the early 50s, when we talked about integrated circuit technology in the late 50s, the Westinghouse Company had a program going, sponsored again by the government, by the Department of Defense, I believe, called molecular electronics. And they were way ahead of their time. It wasn't built around the transistor, but was built around such concepts as, let's look at how we could develop systems on the basis of molecular structures. And one of the examples used was the quartz crystal filter, or the quartz, where we use the molecular properties, really, atomic properties of a crystal to perform a fairly complex system function. And they were looking at things like this, which have been revived today, except it's called quantum electronics. Quantum electronics.
When was this Westinghouse?
I think in the mid-50s. It became in the late 50s and early 60s. We had major debates in the IRE and in the Transistor Circuits Conference of which integrated circuit technology would prevail. Would it be silicon integrated circuits? Would it be what some people like Tudor Finch, who by the way was a charter member of the Transistor Circuit Subcommittee, served on it with me in the early days. Tudor Finch used to like to call it RSI, right scale integration, a combination of thin film technologies and silicon integrated circuit chips. None of us believe that SICs could be pushed to where it is today, where we talk about millions and now billions of transistors on a chip. We were talking about hundreds versus thousands, maybe 10,000s. I once gave a paper that said 10,000 was a limit on the basis of just thermal considerations. And a couple of years later, the transistor structures changed where that limit was completely eliminated.
Context change.
Gordon Moore made the empirical observation that we would go on this doubling every year in silicon integrated circuit complexity, and later revised to doubling every 18 months. And people kept saying, well, it's got to end soon, in 2 years it's going to end. There were papers that it's not going to go beyond 1990, and it keeps going. It's just a remarkable change that has occurred in this technology, and I think it's going to keep going. And I think that eventually we're going to get down to the molecular level, as some of the people in Westinghouse tried to do back in the 50s. And this technology will not stop. And I think it's exciting, and, my only regret is that I can't start all over again.
That long ago, 50 years, at the beginning of this process of conference creation, what sort of problems and challenges did the conference face that you recall?
Well, initially, there was a risk. We didn't know, how popular the conference would become. We talked about the financial risk earlier. Then there was a risk of losing its smallness. The more successful we became, we decided that could we maintain the openness of the conference? Could we maintain the contention that we try to generate between different points of view? Could we maintain these evening sessions as really good discussion forums where people would not be afraid to get up and speak their mind even if they were wrong? And one of the problems, as the conference got more successful, we began to have press attending the conferences. We could not obviously limit them. And of course, the Philadelphia section was very happy to have him come in because it publicized the conference some more. Merlin Carrington was very happy with the financial results. Cash flow was great. Structure was beginning to develop. But it was the usual problems of success. It got big, it got more structured, it got less free. People were not willing to, to talk as openly. We began to have a digest where the purpose of the digest was not to publish the paper, but to publish the essence of the paper. And this didn't satisfy a lot of authors because they would like to have the whole paper published, but that would take more time. But also, as we got more into publications, I think people got more reticent. They wanted to be more sure of what they said. and we began to lose the open, freewheeling nature of the conference.
Began to suffer from the need for perfection and so on.
Yeah, 410 itself was subsumed, I guess, by those evening sessions. Our role changed as a result of the Transistor Circuits Conference, and all in all, we were mostly concerned, though, about the fact that it had become too structured and too big.
Yes. Okay. Is there anything that you can identify that was done to compensate for that? The size issue, was there?
Well, more parallel sessions were put into effect to try to keep it became more specialized.
The interest groups.
Interest groups, more modularized. That also had a bad effect, and that is
the competition of parallelism.
There was too much specialization, not as much cross-fertilization as we had in the earlier conference. I think that was a major issue that we saw. I think our success spoiled the original intent of the conference.
Where did the organizers first meet, and how did you actually find each other? You've alluded to that as in the sense of the 4.1 and 410 committees. But what was the actual first meeting like?
Well, when the Transistor Circuit Subcommittee was formed in 1952, we had a pretty good idea as to where the major activities were going on, and as I said, it was a small group at that time, no more than maybe 100 or so people actively involved in transistor technology. Perhaps it was as much as 200, and we knew where they were. We knew who was doing it. We knew who the leaders of various technology thrusts were, and the companies were limited, and they were all geographically concentrated. I would say the first organizing meeting, which I happened to be a part of, occurred in the latter part of '53. It was in the fall of '53. The location was at IRE headquarters in New York. As I said, the IRE building just across from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the city of New York. And at that time, there were three groups represented. The professional group on circuit theory, which was a parent group of the Circuits Committee, which in turn was a parent group of the Transistor Circuit Subcommittee. The Circuits Committee was represented by Herb Carlin. The 410 Committee, the Transistor Circuit Subcommittee, was represented by John Linville and myself, and the Philadelphia section was represented by Howard Tompkins. And we agreed at that time that the 410 Subcommittee would be the program committee for the first conference, that we would invite the papers for that first conference. And we agreed that Howard Tompkins in the Philadelphia section would do the organizing, and we also agreed to take up John Brainerd's suggestion that the facilities be at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. So we were ready to go, and we had the program committee in place. The subcommittee 410 was a program committee. The organizing group in Philadelphia organized it. Merlin Carrington was the guy who was financially in charge of the conference, and he kept it on a very tight budget. We had no idea how many people would show up, and I know Merlin was very nervous about the fact that he was responsible for possible negative cash flow on that first conference. So everything was Spartan. Everything was we tried to do on sort of a shoestring, and we expected maybe a couple of hundred people, and we completely underestimated the popularity of the conference.